Hey everyone, it's Horror Free For All, and I hope you're doing well today. Recently, we got some news about the Final Destination 6 movie, and I'm super excited because we are getting it in 2025. They have put it into production. We got a working title and a new working premise. And I have to say, for a franchise, at least in terms of the movies, that haven't really deviated far from the formula, seeing a film go more into the comic and novel route with how different the ideas could be in those is kind of refreshing, even though I'm kind of pissed off at the same time. And I'll explain why. So, Final Destination is one of my all-time favorite horror franchises. I know it doesn't have a lot of die-hard fans out there, but I love it for it having this mystique to it. Going into each movie or each book, comic, whatever the case may be, not knowing how these characters are going to die, not knowing how death is going to design things and the order of things, even though you can kind of gauge how these lists and things operate based on other installments. You never really know. There's always a curveball shakeup in there. And there's usually some different lore to experience with them as well. So, Final Destination, historically, in my opinion, doesn't get enough credit for how much backstory and lore it does have within its universe. And in the backstory and lore we have had already established for many years, I honestly feel like this new movie is coming into it and kind of writing it all away. At least a good amount of it, and some parts of it that make it more intriguing and interesting, at least in the former. So let's discuss. So the new film, at least the working title, I don't know if they're keeping this, is going to be called Final Destination Bloodlines. Now, Bloodlines is definitely one of those calling card monikers like Resurrection that make your eyebrows raise every time you see it, because normally when franchises put those type of wordage into a movie title, the movie ends up bombing or being absolute trash. So, I'm hoping that this can rectify the Bloodlines subtitle a little bit. But getting that kind of title made me think off the bat, okay, are we actually doing the first responder stuff, or are we getting something different? Well, we got confirmation that they're going with this ancestry idea, where like this grandmother cheated death in the 1960s, and now her kin of many generations start to piece together that because she avoided death, I guess death has been coming after their family members throughout the years, and now they're coming after them. So that's the idea. Now, I don't mind the idea on paper, okay? This is something that I think could work in the franchise. However, there's a lot of jargon to kind of sift through, and there's some lore, at least put into the books and even a film itself, that makes me question if this is going to be recanonizing the lore of the Final Destination universe. And if it is, I'm going to be really pissed. So there's a concept in the books and kind of briefly touched on in the movies. There's some rules that death operates under. A famous rule is if you're on the list and it's your turn to die, or if it's not your turn to die, you cannot kill yourself. Death has to will you to die. You can't take your own life. You lose that option when you're put on the hit list. Second thing is if new life is breathed into the equation, right? Whether you're a father, you father a child, or you're a mother and you mother a child, if you cheat death and you're able to produce a kid, at some point, the list is null and void, okay? So here's the thing. With that second one being said, if the grandmother avoided death and she gave birth, it should delete the list. That's how it's operated. I think it operated like that in a book. It was one of the twist endings in one of the book. It was mentioned in Final Destination 2. It's canon to me. So we're rewriting canon now to say that, oh, if you give birth, you can't, it doesn't mean that you delete death's list. In fact, death is still going to come after you regardless. To me, I feel like we're moving the goalpost just to be able to execute this idea. And here's the thing. I really like this idea. Don't get me wrong. I like the concept of death coming after the kin, coming after generations of this woman. I think it's interesting. But, when you have all this other stuff before it, and you come in and you're like, we're going to do this requel approach. We're going to do away with old canon and we're going to make our new canon. That's what it feels like to me. And honestly, because the predication event of the entire idea seems to be set in the 60s, we're obviously going pre Flight 181 or Flight 180. I don't know why I called it 181, but Flight 180 in the first film. We're going pre-events of that. We're going pre-events of the Final Destination 5 group even. And we're kind of building onto that. Now, here's my thing. Are we going into the 2020s with this movie? Is it all set in the past? We don't know that much into the details of it. It sounds like to me it's going to be mostly a prequel to the first movie. Kind of expanding on the lore, maybe the unknowns. I think it's going to have Tony Todd come back and reprise his role as Bloodworth, which is kind of odd. And I'm wondering if it's going to involve maybe a young Bloodworth at the same time, or maybe this was his encounter with death. I don't know. We'll just have to see. There's still a lot of unknowns, but to go from a pitched concept about first responders, which honestly I think was a great, brilliant idea. I said as a group of first responders, you can have them kind of trailing a death's design, and they get to uncover that what these people are experiencing is death's design itself, instead of actually being a part of the list, or maybe a couple of them are. I don't know. But that seemed like a different enough angle to do. But this feels like we're going into a completely different mechanism of delivering the story, where we are having to go through the lens of a family. Now, the family aspect, I think, is really cool. I think that's a fun shakeup. We've never had this before in the franchise, where all the victims are just a family. That could be fun. And I'm curious to see how that dynamic plays in a Final Destination movie. And what I'm most excited for is to see how Death comes back. And I think that for Death coming back, I've always thought that he can have some twisted sense of humor, and he's had some creativity in the past, where Death has used some really intricate designs or taken advantage of his surroundings and kill people in some really fucked up ways. What I'm hoping for is non-generic kills. And this movie, I'm telling you, if the concept isn't going to win people over, it's going to be the kills. And if the kills are weak in this movie, you might as well call this attempted reboot a failure, because I don't think that's going to impress anybody, especially after you've seen certain kills, especially in like the 5th installment or the 2nd movie, hell, even the 3rd and maybe even 1st movies in some degree. I wanted to say any kill in the 4th film was groundbreaking, minus the escalator one. But you need to have some creative deaths in this. You need to be similar in that vein to how the old films were, where they were using the surroundings to the fullest extent. You need to have that here. And I feel like if you have a good recipe of really cool deaths, some cool lore drops with like Bloodworth and all that, you have a good setting, maybe even set in the past, you can have some aesthetics there to kind of bring out the vibe and the atmosphere of the movie, you'll probably have a solid film on your hands. My biggest worry, though, is that long-standing fans that have seen the former 5 movies are going to come into this and be kind of underwhelmed by the deaths or by the concept, if it's too boring or dull or not thrilling enough. I can definitely see the casual audience. I can already see it now. This is the best concept ever in Final Destination. I can totally see people giving the knee-jerk reaction like they did to Halloween Ends, saying that this is the most different movie, hence it's the best. I can see it now. I'm not that type of person. I actually have to see it to believe it. I'm not going to give something the best just because it's different. But I am excited for it, nonetheless. And I want to hear down in the comment section if you're excited for Final Destination 6. What do you want out of this new movie? If you haven't seen my want list for Final Destination 6, I will say that everything I said on that list, for the most part, is the same. Give or take the idea and the context that it was going to be centered around first responders. Just plug that into this plot now, And that's basically what I want to see. But yeah, let me know. I love this franchise. Let me know if there's more of you out there, and I'll see you next time.